Hello everyone and welcome to the Proudfoot podcast. Today on our 10th episode, we're going to talk about backgrounds in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So let's get started. First off, what is your background? Well, in addition to coming up with your character's life story, where they came from, what their childhood was like, who their friends were, what were the events that brought them to the here and now, you also have this thing called a background that you get to pick out of the player's handbook. They begin on chapter 4, and they start on page 127. There's a little bit of prelude to the backgrounds before you actually start seeing what all the options are. And this is just to explain some things about alignment, the different personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. These are going to be 4 things you get from your background that summarize how your character acts, basically. Not only that, you also are going to get potentially four things from your background, such as your skill proficiency, tool proficiency, languages, and equipment. Now, the reason I say potentially 4 is because not all backgrounds give you tool proficiencies and languages. Some backgrounds only give you one or the other. Every single background does give you skill proficiencies and equipment, though. So just keep that in mind when you're picking them, that you're not guaranteed to get all 4, but you will definitely get 3. Unlike in your class, when you got to pick from a set of skill proficiencies, your background will just give you 2. If either of them conflict with something you already got from your class, go back to your class and just pick a different option. There should be plenty to choose from. With tool proficiencies, you just get a few if they are there. Sometimes tool proficiencies will have options for you to take, but usually it's just, here's the thing you're proficient with. And then with languages, sometimes it's optional, sometimes it is one, but usually it's optional, so unless it specifically says language, you usually get to pick, and they'll say, choose 2 languages, choose 1 language, so on and so forth. And then equipment, similar to the skill proficiency, it's just a list of equipment that you get to start with. If this overlaps with something from your class, you can choose to pick something else if it's an object that you got an option to choose when you were in your class. But you can just have multiple of the same item. It doesn't hurt in D&D the same way having proficiency multiple times in a skill does hurt, because you can't get proficiency more than once in D&D. Then the other thing that comes from your background would be a feature. So every background comes with one feature. It's usually feature, and then whatever the name of the feature is. So for the entertainer, it's by popular demand. For the folk hero, it's rustic hospitality. For the criminal, it's criminal contact, so on and so forth. And these all do different things, but they're never anything super spectacular. It's always just a nice little bonus in certain situations when they demand for it. So the criminal contact, for instance, is you are in tune with a network of criminals and you have a liaison that you can go to that can get you information or potentially help you get into that underground network that might be harder for party members who don't have that background. However, there's other backgrounds that do additional things, like, let me just flip to it here. The Outlander background, which has Wanderer, which is the ability to travel through terrain without getting completely lost, which is very handy. There's also the Sage, which has the special feature Researcher, which allows you to be able to look things up in a library or university fairly easily, and this is with DM discretion. So all of these come with a little bit of a grain of salt of DM's discretion, and just for perspective, it's important for the DM to kind of know what benefits you get, because then certain situations can play out a little bit differently, especially in non-combat encounters. So that RPing stuff is where these features typically shine the brightest, as opposed to your class features, which maybe potentially shine in non-combat scenarios, but are meant for combat scenarios, typically speaking. Okay. The last thing from your class, what I alluded to, personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. Here we go. These are 4 tables in every single class with 1 to 2 sentence descriptors of what they are. Your personality traits is really just a descriptor of how your character is going to act in the world, and you're going to pick 2 of these. Ideals is your outlook on the world, so it's going to be heavily tied to your alignment, not the full alignment, but usually just one of the axes, so either the lawful chaotic axis or the good evil axis. Then there is bonds, and bonds is really the thing that drives you in the game and in life as a character, the thing that's going to push you forward through the tough times. Then your flaws is something that can be exploited by your enemies and isn't something that is the most favored thing about you, let's say. So that is backgrounds in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Eddie Proudfoot podcast. If you did, please let us know by following us on Instagram, Spotify, or Twitter. And as always, may the gods have mercy on your soul.